A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. So, he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. By thoughts, I mean specifically chatter in the skull, perpetual and compulsive repetition of words, of reckoning and calculating. I'm not saying that thinking is bad. Like everything else, it's useful in moderation. A good servant, but a bad master. And all so-called civilized peoples have increasingly become crazy and self-destructive because through excessive thinking they have lost touch with reality.
Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to The Way of the Force. And we continue our journey into talking about Alan Watts as a lens to the Star Wars universe. And with me for these segments is Joshua V. Johnson.
How you doing, MC?
Hey, Josh. I would say that this topic that we are going to take on is very appropriate for the world as we know it.
The present time, yes.
The present space and time that we exist. And
I would say so.
The topic we are going to cover is meditation and mindfulness. And we're going to use Alan Watts to help us kind of view what happens in the Star Wars universe a little bit, as well as what we can take home with us with that lens. So I think it'll be good.
Very cool.
So just briefly, if you could summarize, for people who haven't listened to our first episode on this, who is Alan Watts?
Alan Watts, a lot of people like to say Alan Watts was a guru with Zen Buddhism. Alan Watts would, I don't want to say fight you because he would not fight anybody, but he would not say that was correct. Let's say he was very big on talking about himself as a quote unquote spiritual entertainer. He used to say when he gave talks in the 60s and different things about Zen Buddhism is basically what he's known for. He used to say that when you came to one of his talks, he wasn't trying to convert you to anything, that you should come to him the same way you might go to a concert hall and listen to a pianist play Beethoven, right? And that if you liked Beethoven, great, and you liked the way this person was playing it, perfect, right? But there's no conversion to Beethoven, right?
Yeah.
So he went about it that way, and he had started. He was from England. He started out as I believe, Episcopalian minister, and went through seminary, had a church for a while. But when he was young, he, I believe it was his parents had a boarding house or something. I forget exactly. But anyway, he got introduced through a friend of the family to Japanese culture and Zen Buddhism and Eastern philosophy at an early age, and then kind of stayed with it throughout his life. And as he got older, he left the church at one point, and became a lot of these people, like if you look at people like, I'm trying to think of like Gary Snyder, who was a famous poet who had come back from World War II and then went and actually like studied in Japan for a long time and became, like an official Zen master or whatever. Alan never really took any formal, in the way that a lot of people of the day did, formal education like that. But he did study with a lot of these guys, and he had been to Japan many times and whatever. But he's basically most well known for introducing Eastern philosophy to a Western world. Is what it comes down
especially
to.
In the 60s and 70s in California.
Exactly.
He had a radio show, and that really influenced a lot of people and was in the environment to influence people like Joseph Campbell, who wrote and spoke with Alan Watts as he was doing his work, and they would reference each other in their works. So it's like the general, the ocean and the sea or the water that everybody in California lived in, including George Lucas when he was growing up.
Exactly. It's very hard to believe that George Lucas hadn't heard of Alan Watts or wasn't influenced by him in some way, even if he has never said it, right? Or just given the general like zeitgeist of the time, I guess you could say, like in California in the 60s, right? When everything was going on and Alan was popular and what he was introducing to the Western world and just Zen Buddhism in particular. So, yeah.
And from a Star Wars creator perspective, I was recommended to listen to Alan Watts in addition to the Tao Te Ching to understand the Force better. So it's all in there, and it's really important to like deep dive into this influence on Star Wars, even though it's like literally never mentioned that George was influenced by Alan Watts. Right.
A lot of the ways one of the ways I like to think about it real quick is when people say, oh, you're getting too deep with this stuff, like, number one, like that's the fun of it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you know that better than anybody. But like one of the things
I have been told I think about Star Wars too much or too deeply.
Too deeply. Right. But people are like, well, that's not, it like you always say, like, we're looking through a lens, right?
Yeah.
And one of the examples I love since December is with Knives Out. If you watch, it came out, because Ryan had released a director's commentary you could go to the theater and listen to.
Yeah.
And then there was another one that came out with the Blu-ray or the digital edition when it came out on iTunes and Blu-ray and whatever. There was like another one where he's sitting with Noah and I think his cinematographer, and they like talk through the movie. And one of the things they talk about is at the scene where, so when Ransom and Marta are sitting in the restaurant and she's eating the beans and he's like, right, and they're having this conversation. As a Canadian, you might have picked this out. Gordon Lightfoot, Sundown, is playing right over the back. And I love that song, right? Always have. It's like this dark kind of cool tune to it, right? But my point with this is that when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, Ryan's a genius, right? And I'd even like tweeted about it, that he had played that over the song. When the commentary, he talks about how he had always loved that song and he just stuck it in, but he didn't ever realize where that song came from. And if you've ever listened to an interview with Gordon Lightfoot, there was a woman that he was having an affair with, got a divorce from his wife, and he was madly in love with this woman. And she is very famous. I forget her exact name, but she's very famous because she was basically a groupie back in the 60s and had been around with a bunch of bands and different bigwigs of the time. And lo and behold, that's who he wrote Sundown about, right? This kind of jealous rage of, you better take care of you creeping around my back steps, this jealous rage type of love stuff. And it ends up that years later, she was with John Belushi when he died and had actually been blamed for a while for injecting him with too many drugs, let's say, when Belushi died. And so a lot of people had tweeted at Ryan. He talks about this in the commentary, and we're like, dude, this is brilliant, because was this a allusion like to Marta because of how, the whole movie revolves around an injection that she had, you think, messed up. And that's basically Sundown was written about this woman who had
his one-time
presumably
girlfriend,
done
Kathy
this to Belushi.
Smith.
There you go. Yes. Kathy Smith. Thank you.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is Ryan didn't know that backstory when he put that song in, right? He just liked the song. But if you know that backstory when you went to see it, you're like, oh man, this, like, you get that extra deep layer if you knew that. Do you see what I'm saying? Ryan didn't know that when he put the song in. He talks about this in the commentary. But my point is that those things are kind of floating out there, right? They're floating out there in the zeitgeist, and that, like, so it works. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like
there's more examples of that sort of thing happening in Star Wars. Like I have a brilliant example. So in my recent interview with Ian Desher, who wrote The Merry Rise of Skywalker, the Merry Wives of Windsor, which was the title that this is sort of based on, is all about how Falstaff was a favorite of the Queen's and was brought back basically from the dead from Henry IV, this play, inexplicably. And that's exactly what happens with Palpatine. Out of nowhere, Palpatine, who was a fan favorite, is suddenly back from the dead. Literally.
Oh, wow. Right.
And Ian Desher was like, I had no idea when I came up with that title.
See, and
like he knew, but he didn't think about it that way.
Exactly. Right.
And there are other examples specifically in Star Wars. One I know of is with John Powell doing the Enfys Nest theme for the Cloud Riders. Good friend Christy Cruz on the show regularly actually had a chance to ask him about that and said, when you used the throat singing, did you use it because of the generational nature of the throat singing, because it's passed down from mother to daughter as a skill and a technique, and it's also like something that you have to be born with to be able to do. You have to have these like very specific vocal cords. And he's like, no, but I'm going to steal that from now on.
That's cool though, right?
Like there's these things that exist out there in the world, and it's like you have to remember that as much as like we're aware of things consciously, we're also not aware of everything that we actually are aware of.
Exactly.
Like you think about communication, 70% is nonverbal. There's a lot of things that we pick up in our brains that we're not even consciously aware of.
That we're doing, right? Yeah. And so I say that just to say, like, when we talk about Alan Watts and Star Wars, there's no interview or book you can go to like you can with like a Joseph Campbell, right? Where Lucas was like, it's obvious that Campbell is tied to Star Wars, right? Like,
yeah.
But there's nothing.
But I mean, Campbell also talked about Alan Watts in his work.
They did. They were good friends. They hung out together a lot. The other big one you will like, I think we talked a little bit about this last time. Watts was a contemporary and had spent time with Carl Jung. So, there's a lot of stuff that
it's like
you're saying, like bleeds into the story that you might not realize.
Of Star Wars thought is Jungian archetypes, Campbellian thought, which pulled on Jungian archetypes and Alan Watts, and they all talked to each other.
Right, exactly. So
yeah,
as I say that just to say, as we go on and people are like, wait, what? Like, it's there, right?
It's there, yeah.
And if it's not explicit, like, just go with it because it's fun. It's a fun lens to look through. And
it's an important lens, actually. And it also helps you be like, okay, how can I view Star Wars and take this home with me? And this is not something that is a new idea for like Star Wars. Actually, in the fall, an amazing woman, Amy Radcliffe, is doing the Jedi Mind book. And it's all about kind of like meditation and mindfulness from a Jedi perspective. So like it's, it's not a new concept for Star Wars. And I'm happy that they're exploring it more from how do you take these lessons home with you? And
right.
I'm very excited to speak with Amy. I hope she has an opportunity and I have an opportunity to interview her.
That would be really cool.
Yeah. So it's going to be out in the fall. So
it's a neat way to get into probably what a lot of people want to get into with Star Wars more. I think the Force, right? Like, what is it? Like, how's it used? Like we're going to talk about today, the meditation aspect of it and those types of things. So, yeah.
And like, why is it seems to resonate with people more than just, say, a normal like superhero movie is because it's plugging into things from a spiritual perspective for humanity, a very humanistic perspective. And when you look at things with maybe you put on a different lens to look at Star Wars, you're like, oh, that's what it was trying to get at. And that's what I should take home with me. And again, it's all up to you what you take home from Star Wars, but you can take home a lot. So I think it's valuable to talk about these things.
Right. And kind of off of what you just said, why is Star Wars different? Why does it resonate with people? The Force. I think a lot of it too has to do with when you look into Alan Watts and study him, the man's got bukus of hours and hours of lectures and audio recordings and books he's written and different things. But one that's real interesting, and one of the points he would hammer home in quite a few different interviews or lectures or talks was that he always saw in general the difference between Western and Eastern philosophy like this. As quick and simple as you can get. Western philosophy, if you look at it and study it as, tries to get you to conform to society, where Eastern philosophy tries to get you to understand you are a part of the universe, right? And every living thing around you, which obviously, if you've watched even 5 minutes of Star Wars, right, you know why that kind of fits better with, right? So it is, it's the whole Yoda thing when he talks to Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, right? Like it's all around us, connects us, it binds us, right? This type of thing. And that's exactly what Eastern philosophy in general tries to do, is to get you out of your own head and to realize that you're a part of it. You are it, right? Yeah. That you are, Alan Watts used to say, which I love, like it's kind of one of those things, if you think about it too long, you might go crazy. That you are nothing more than an aperture for the universe viewing itself, right?
I love that.
It's really cool. And that, whether you're out with people in general, you're in the woods, in the forest with animals or whatever, that you're just an aperture for the universe to view itself through. And that's what it is.
You experiencing the universe is what's important, actually, then.
Right. Yeah. That you're connected to everything, that you're not separate from it. He always used to talk about that, especially in the Western world, that we've been, just through various forms of religion and society, the way we've structured it in the Western world, that you're separate, that you're this thing, you're this ego wrapped up inside a bag of skin, right? And that you end at your skin, you end at your fingertips, right? You end, right? And he's like, no, you have to think of yourself. Well, we can get into that in a minute. As a fish in water, right?
Yeah. I really appreciate Star Wars for a few reasons, because even, there is several examples of meditation and mindfulness in Star Wars from especially the prequels era. And it continues on. And the people that we see meditate the most are actually dark force users. We see Dooku meditate, we see Anakin and then Vader meditate. And actually Vader meditates way more than Anakin ever did. And maybe he's contemplating his own unfortunate situation all the time. But who knows, right? We also see Yoda meditate. One of the characters that I've learned to love over time because of his philosophy and what he represents to Star Wars is Qui-Gon Jinn. And I never used to love him. I used to be like, he's an idiot. What the hell? Right. And I've come to appreciate what he has tried to do and represent in Star Wars. So from a mindfulness perspective, we hear him talk about being mindful of the living force, whereas all the other masters in the council talk about meditating on the future and the past and trying to understand things. So
which is so not right.
Yeah. But what is the difference between being mindful or doing mindfulness exercises versus meditation?
So mindfulness, as a basic definition, is just being aware, Qui-Gon, being aware of your surroundings. Yeah. Right? Being centered, just being still. A good little quote from Alan Watts for this might be, water becomes clear and calm only when left alone. Right? That if you just sit, right, with yourself. And this is how a lot of mindfulness meditation, there's different forms of meditation, obviously, right? But mindfulness meditation, for the most part, is just you concentrating on your breath, right? That you just drop your shoulders, sit in a chair, sit upright, right? Because otherwise you'll fall asleep, which does happen. If you've ever used a Headspace app or some kind of app to meditate, like, and you've never done it before. I can remember when I first got into it, like the first month, I would just zonk, I'm out. Like I'd start and I'd wake up like 30 minutes later and I'm like, oh, right.
I'm a very bad meditator, so that's my problem.
Well, but part of it too is like how you see, you always see people sitting cross-legged, right? Like Luke and whatever, right? And part of that, like to go back to the original aspects of it, part of that was, so it was, you were a little bit uncomfortable, right? So that you didn't fall asleep, so that you would stay awake, right? Through it, and that you could just focus on your breath. And the breath is more often than not used because you're always going to have it, right? No matter where you're at, it's something you're going to have. Right. Exactly. So, so that's really all it is. Matthew Bortolin, who's written 2 great books, if people want to get into this specifically with Star Wars, with Buddhism, Zen Buddhism and Star Wars, talks about this. Like, that's all you need to do is close your eyes, sit in a chair, sit upright, get comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Drop your shoulders, kind of feel yourself sitting, feel the gravity of you, right, in the chair, like kind of focus on your feet on the floor, your butt in the chair, your hands on your knees, maybe wherever you put them, right? And feel how tense you are. And we'll get into this in a minute, but like in your shoulders, right? Mm-hmm. And then take a few deep breaths and then close your eyes and just focus on your breathing, right? And not on thoughts. If thoughts come, you let them go, right? Mm-hmm. Like as thoughts come in, you realize that it's a thought, that as the practice, as Zen Buddhism says, it's just an illusion, right? Your thinking is just an illusion. And this, you can go off on any one of these tangents, right? And if anybody knows me, I'm good at that. So I'm going to try and stay focused here and concentrate, Marie Claire. But it's one of those things where, like a lot of people I see on Twitter are constantly asking, like, why do they tell Anakin this in the prequels, and can't they see suffering and like the Jedi, and Bortolin talks about this in the Dharma of Star Wars really well, where he talks about a lot of people think when they say let it go, they're not asking Anakin, and they're not like in a Jedi way, they're not asking you to forget that these things happen to you, right? Mm-hmm. It's not some rosy thing where, hey, if you just sit and breathe, close your eyes, like all that stuff goes away, like deaths you can't get over or whatever, like, right there. Let it go is more, you're letting the thoughts go, right? Mm-hmm. It's acknowledging that those things happened, whatever it might be, whatever that trauma might be, or whatever it is that's bothering you, or that you're looking into the future, like you've gotten some big project coming up, right, or whatever. Meditation helps you sit in the now, in the present, mm-hmm. right? Being fully aware of where you are right now. And it's not asking you to forget that you have these things you need to plan for, or to forget that things happened. It's to realize that you are constantly throughout the day, constantly as a human being, talking to yourself in your head. And that a lot of times that can add up to 90% of your quote unquote problems or what's bothering you.
Just to summarize, like mindfulness is that you're actively paying attention to the moment with an intentioned and non-judgmental mind.
That's a much better way to say it than I did in the past 15 minutes.
No, but like it's very in the moment, and that's what Qui-Gon is trying to get Obi-Wan to figure out is, look, if you just pay attention to exactly where you are in the universe and exactly what's happening, you'll be able to more successfully understand exactly what is happening to you and around you. Because if you're constantly worrying about the future or ruminating on the past, those things take time and energy away from dealing with where you are in this exact moment. Exactly.
Okay. Can you hear that?
Yep.
Okay. So you're right. And I'm just playing this and I'll send you the clip if it. So it's it's just the fact that, because a lot of people get mindfulness confused and think your mind is full of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
The phrasing of it. But it's more of you let all these things come at you and realize all they are thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that if something seems bad, there's no bad or good. There's no judgment on it. It's just a thought. And you kind of reach out with your mind, right? Like there's all these visualization techniques and things, if you really get into meditation, you can do, right? Like, but you just kind of reach out and zap it with a feather and it into a cloud and it goes away, right? Or the one I love because of who I am, it's like you're sitting on the beach and watching the waves roll in, and waves come in sets, and you just watch them. That's all they are. You're just watching these thoughts roll in. You're not interacting with them. You're not saying, oh, here comes a big scary one. Look at this thing coming, right? Like, or why does this one keep coming back? It's just, you get to a point where you concentrate on your breath and you just realize those things come and go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those things that, like, if you practice mindfulness meditation, takes a while to get to the point. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is actually from both of my parents, because when I was a kid, I used to struggle with how much I would think about the world. And so it's very similar to how Sherlock Holmes thinks about things, but I actually have a mind library, and I file things away for later. And there's a certain amount of mindfulness in being like, I have this thought, where should I put it? And I go to the right place in my mind library, which also has an art gallery. I don't know why. But I go and I file it away. So my dad was a philosopher and my mother was a librarian. And this was their solution for me, like having, and so they gave me this framework, and that's how I think about things, especially when I'm trying to remember certain things too. And it's very similar to Sherlock Holmes's Mind Palace. I don't know why, but that but the idea is that you go into a building and you imagine yourself doing an activity that is very calming to you. And you can come up with your own. It doesn't need to be a beach. It doesn't need to be a feather popping thoughts. It can be your own thing that you're very comfortable with. And it should be a space that you feel comfortable and calm in.
Right. Exactly. And you will realize when you say that, right, there's different ways to practice mindful meditation. When you get into it, then you start to
Animal Crossing, and you're like, I've taken this thing and put it on the shelf and it's put away. Yeah.
Right. And you'll get to a point then when you start to really get into it, that gets deep into other aspects of like Zen Buddhism. But that if you are, and Alan Watts talks about this, if you are meditating for a purpose, if you're like, oh, I'm stressed out today, I'm going to go meditate, you're doing it wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you can get so deep with it that, and this is kind of the thing of, right, when you went to a Zen master, is like, I want to stop. I want to stop the thoughts, right? I want to stop desiring things, let's say, just to put it, in general terms. I want to stop desiring things. So you start meditating. Well, if you're meditating to stop desiring, you're desiring to meditate to, like, right? You can get into this big, like, cyclical thing. But the point is, is that it's like he says, that water becomes clear and calm only when it's left alone, right?
Yeah.
And to go back to what you were saying at the very beginning about this being poignant for the present time, right? There's a lot of stressful things going on in the world right now, right? And you're going to be much more aware and able to handle those things if every now and then you take a break, you give your mind a rest, right? You just, as bad as things might seem, or as grim as things might seem, that if you get in the practice of just sitting for, even if it's 5 to 10 minutes a day, and just being calm like water, right? Just letting it come and go and realizing you're right here, you're right now, right? This is the whole thing with Yoda and Luke, right? What does Yoda tell Luke in Empire Strikes Back, right? When he doesn't really know who he is, and he's like talking to Obi-Wan, through the Force, and he's like, long have I watched this one, right? Like, always his mind on the future is, right? Like Luke's always like, right? And then when he gets, this is what I love about The Last Jedi, one of the many things. He, when he bonks him on the head with his little cane, and he's like, you're still doing this, dude. Like, you're still worried about the future. You're still worried about the past.
It's been like
you're
30 years. What are you doing?
He's like, come on, enough. Like, you just need to be here and now, right? And it's after that Luke then realizes, and then he goes and has his big meditation scene, and, it's really cool. But yeah, the point is that you just settle down and you try and be where you are right then without anything else. Because as Alan Watts says, words and symbols get in the way, right? That all these things, one of the examples he uses, what's a weed? Why are you stressed out that you need to go pull the weeds in your front yard? Why do you call it a weed? Why does weed have a bad connotation, right? Who told you that? Like, it's just a thing growing. Like, why are you worried about it, right? And you kind of go down, you're like, oh yeah, why do I need to go get chemicals to spray all over the place, right? Like, where did that thought come from? Why is weed have a negative connotation to it? And when you realize all these things around you are just happening, and you just watch them happen, right? Like, he was fond of saying an apple tree apples. Like, there's no concept of a tree. It's just this thing that's doing this thing, right? Yep. That the earth peoples, the earth apples, the earth, right? Like, and you think about it, and there's all these words and concepts that we as humans have put on all this stuff that goes on around us. And it's just constant thoughts and words and symbols and things that we're like, whoa, right? And if you just take some time, sit and realize these things are just coming and going, it helps. It really does. And I mean, and most people probably listening to this have heard or might have even seen or read all the studies that medical research they've done that shows that mindfulness meditation, right, helps, like with heart disease. I mean, it does all kinds of stuff, lowers your blood pressure. It just amazing what it can do. Right. So and
there's been several studies like in health psychology where if you have high blood pressure and you meditate or you focus and you're able to get biofeedback. So you're able to actually hear your own heart rate or see it represented on a screen. You can control your own heart rate by being mindful of it. So you can control your own body. There are, parasympathetic systems in your body that you can't necessarily control, but being mindful allows you to help make those things more regulated. Like, you need to breathe, but if you're mindful, you can breathe at a normal pace. Unfortunately, there are some symptoms to do with diseases that, like, you can't control, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing I always try and emphasize too, is when you're talking about this stuff, I don't want anybody to think we're like,
this isn't like a
people that have actual issues, like, actual medical issues or things like, no, we're not saying just sit. All that stuff goes away, right? Like, no, it doesn't, right? It like the perfect example I like to use when it comes up to this, like real world stuff, is like when Kendra, my wife, got cancer, right? Meditating was not going to make her cancer go away, right? No. But the guy who does the Headspace app has had cancer, and he has a really cool that she used to listen to when she was getting chemo. And then I would, had we both not meditated through that and just taken time each day to stay calm and realize a lot of the stuff we were hearing about her, 5-year outlook and stage 3 and and all these terms, right? All these things that are made up in the real world that mean something and are legitimate to focus on at times, that had we not taken a few minutes each day individually and just sat and stayed calm and realized those things are just things and they come and go, right? Like, I believe, and so does Kendra, that, we wouldn't have gotten through it as with his, things would have been much more difficult. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Right. So it's not saying that real life things don't happen and everything's an illusion and no, it's just like Alan Watts used to say, it's a form of philosophy. It's, he used to be fond of calling the Buddha, right? Siddhartha. He used to be fond of calling him more of like the world's first psychologist, right? That he showed people there's these 4 noble truths, right? There's a 8-fold path. There's this, like, things aren't going to change in the world, but in all, the first truth, everything comes from suffering, right? Was the Buddha's thing, but that there's a way out of this, right? That there's a way that you can train your mind and think about things that I don't want to say make things easier, but that give you a better perspective.
Provides context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just to kind of say, I think some people think like meditation is this like, I don't know, silver bullet or magic bullet to having a better life or whatever. But no, it's actually just more so that you can have more energy to handle the things that you need to handle on a day-to-day life that are hard. You need to allow yourself. It's just like active sleep for your brain, right? You're not going to...
Right. That's a really good way of saying
think
that.
About anything. And I find certain activities to be very meditative, like climbing. So like when I go rock climbing, because I can only focus on not falling off the wall. I have trouble actually meditating. So this is actually helping me personally. I have trouble being mindful. I can be, but like sitting and like closing my eyes and not thinking about anything, I have trouble with. So I find activities meditative. Some people find yoga meditative, right? Because it's hard and you're doing it and, you can't think about other things. But yeah, rock climbing specifically, because if you don't focus on what you're doing, you end up like falling off the wall.
Probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, exactly. And I had struggled with it at first too. I mean, you know me well enough to know I was diagnosed with ADD when I was 33. And it's something people listening, when Marie Claire asked me to be on, she's like, Josh, have you done your notes yet? And I'm like, yeah, I got it. And I'll usually end up sending her a screenshot, like to prove like I've done them. They're just like, I sent her one for this. I'm like, I was in the garage and I was just scribbling on my workbench as I was out in the garage, like, because me being in the garage is like therapy, like meditation for me. Like, I have a lot of stuff to do out there with my son, and he likes to hang out with me, and we go out there.
Some people
and my
find
daughter too.
gardening meditative.
Exactly.
Like you're connecting with nature, going for a walk or going for a hike, or, me tromping through the woods yesterday. It was very, very nice. I think that people tend to think you have to do it in a specific way, but it's actually like how you connect to what is around you and are in a place that can be like, hey, I'm in the middle of this. Some people find coffee shops to be very, a Grand Central Station, hanging out in the middle of Grand Central Station. Not right now, but, like where there's like busyness, constant noise. And then you're like, I'm aware of all of that, but I am also here, Right.
And to bring it back to Star Wars, like think about like what you just said with Qui-Gon, who's probably the epitome of everything we're talking about, especially the way that Claudia has written him in books that came much later after the prequels, right? Like
expanding on the prequels.
Exactly. Right. So
that book was Master and Apprentice.
Right. Yes. Let's start with just from the movies. So and I think Claudia talked about this when you had her on for one of her episodes with you, but where Qui-Gon in the Phantom Menace, him and Obi-Wan are fighting Darth Maul, and the blockade force field things are keeping them from attacking each other at one point. And Obi-Wan's like hopping around and Darth Maul is, and what's Qui-Gon do? He kneels down, closes his eyes and meditates, right? Like he just lets everything in, comes, calm. And I love that. I love that. Like, that is so cool, right? That you're in this life and death fight.
Yeah.
And that's what a true Jedi, like, that's what you would do, right? Which is why I love then again in TLJ, but we can get there later. Like, what does Luke do, right? Like, he realizes he can't go chase Rey down in the Falcon, right? Yep. His X-Wing's underwater. Like, and so he's just going to be here and now, right?
Yep.
When he does that, he's like the ultimate Jedi, right? Like
it is the most Jedi thing that he could have done.
Yes, right?
Because he not only saves the resistance, he confronts and apologizes to his nephew. He is able to do all of these things, but also not add any sin of blood to Ben Solo's hands.
Right.
You know, like Ben Solo was going to confront him. They were going to confront each other. And he's like, not on my watch, kid. You know, right? I'm going to be here. You're going to deal with this, but it's not going to be in the way that you think you need. I'm going to help you.
Right. And there's a way going back to the whole, what we started with Rian Johnson, Knives Out, like how deep we get with stuff. There's a way you can view all of that's all Luke just being here and now and realizing that all these things he was worried about after his long talk with Yoda, you know, well, it wasn't even that long, but like that he's not anymore focused on the future or the past. He just knows things are happening right now, right?
He was ruminating.
He's here.
He was ruminating on the island. He was focused on the past and he was focused on the future.
30 years.
Yeah.
Just like, I mean, he's the perfect example of how you can not have any headspace, how you just can fill your mind with negative thoughts or maybe even hopeful thoughts for the future that you can't control right now, right? Like, you know, like Alan Watts used to say, the past is a memory, the future is an illusion. Why are you worried about those things, right? Just be here, right? It's not saying that, it's not saying that all the issues that him and Ben had and all the things that happened between them didn't happen, right? That's not what you mean by an illusion. It just means that what you're doing right now, instead of being in the present moment, is you're conjuring up this illusion in your head of how bad that thing was or how different it might have been to you or to the other person, which is the great thing with the whole Rashomon reference, right? How Ben sees it one way, Luke sees it another, right? Like these are things, these are illusions. Rey's trying to get at the truth when she's talking to both of them and trying to figure out what actually happened, right? But in the grand scheme of things, none of that really matters for that present moment, right? What matters is, you know, the resistance is about to be wiped out, right? Luke needs to quit pouting, get out of his own head, right? And that all comes at the end through meditation. It all works itself out. And it's beautiful if you think about it, right? But I'm me and I think about it probably too much from time to time. But my point is that you can see through The Last Jedi, through Star Wars, through most of Star Wars, that saying that the past is an illusion, the future's an expectation, you know, whatever. The only thing you can control, and you really can't even control that, is just now. You just sit and breathe and be mindful, as Qui-Gon would say, of your surroundings.
Or how Luke guides Rey and reminds her and himself through the act of teaching, you know, breathe, just breathe, reach out with your feelings.
Oh, okay.
Right? That scene?
That is, I mean, it's beautiful. And the other thing he does, you know, once they get past the jokey part where she sticks his hand out and he whacks it with the, you know, the leaf or whatever, he grabs her hand and puts it on the rock.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's saying, and this is, this goes back to the Buddha, right? The original Buddha. There's in the story, and if anybody wants to really get into Buddhism as far as the background of it, years ago, there was a great PBS special. If you look it up, the actor Richard Gere, he did funded a whole. They talked to the Dalai Lama. Like, it's really great, and they go into Buddhism, and it's like a 2-hour thing you can watch on PBS. But when the Buddha finally gets to the point where he is not, he's like, okay, he sits underneath the Buddha tree. And if you watch The Last Jedi, this imagery is just everywhere, right? The library tree. Okay.
Yeah.
He has, because at the time elephants, you know, were like tanks when armies. So he has all these elephants. Now think about Luke standing in front of the AT-ATs, right? He has all these elephants come up, and there's these different gods and things that tempt him with different desires and whatever, right? You could see like Ray is this like temptress, right? She wants him to come back, right? Her and Leia, like, come back. And he's like, you're not getting it. That's not, he doesn't really know yet either, but he's just saying like, you know, the Jedi, no. Ryan even talks about this in the commentary. Luke's issue is, if I bring the Jedi back, then the Sith are just going to rise up again. And it's just going to, right? But he can't figure out, you know, how to get in the middle, right? The third way. He can't figure out that middle path until the end. But if you watch this PBS special, they do a really good job of showing this, where the Buddha sits in front of the tree. He's tempted by desire and different things. At one point, an army appears with all these elephants, and they sling arrows at him. Remind anybody of anything, right? And they don't hit him. Nothing happens, right? And they all start freaking out, and they're like, and this is when the Buddha, or this is when he becomes the Buddha, right? Like this is when he becomes, right? So at this point, he's not the Buddha yet. But and when they ask him, like, you know, what's going on, whatever, he simply touches his finger to the ground, right? And I forget the exact saying, but he's basically, the point is, I'm this. I've realized now, right? The Buddha, I've realized now that I am, as Alan Watts would say, nothing more than an aperture through which the universe views itself, right? So the reason your arrows didn't hit me, right? Exactly.
The universe.
Yes.
They are one and the same, which is which is literally the point of the Force.
Right. And so when you watch that scene in TLJ, I mean, it's Luke has become the Buddha, right? Like at that point. And then he talks to his nephew, right? And they go through this thing, because then you become not then, but like the Bodhisattva's deal is, once you attain nirvana, you don't just get off the wheel of samsara, right?
You
like
decide to stay.
You decide to stay to help others, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Luke ends up doing. And the other thing I love that Ryan does so well is, if you watch, you can literally see, because nirvana is not, in the Western world, we tend to think of it as like heaven, something you obtain. Alan Watts always says it's not this purpley goo place that you go to and you become one with. He's like, the way that it was always taught in Zen Buddhism is that you can attain it at any time. You're actually in nirvana right now. You just don't realize it until you breathe out, right? Which goes back kind of to the meditation thing. When you just let your breath out and fall, it's kind of like literally like a weight lifted off your shoulders, right? Like you realize, okay. And if you watch Luke, it's very subtle, but when they zoom in on him, like right as he realizes, I don't want to say that he got Ben, but he's got him to where he realizes, okay, I've, whatever Ben needed, I've obviously done now. And he started on his path, right? And if you watch that scene, you can see Luke literally, Ryan gets him, he literally lets out a breath and his shoulders drop.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's so much
it's very symbolic.
Stuff, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so you can almost literally see when Luke finally attains, what we would call nirvana, right? Or when he becomes one with the Force and,
What is it about how the Jedi and the Sith meditate to like see the future? Because it's not mindfulness when they're using it that way.
No. And so this maybe gets into the concept of the void, maybe a little bit, is how I think of it anyway, when you're talking about what they can see when, because you'll hear like in the prequels, Yoda, in Windu, or constantly the dark side's clouding things, right? Or in the original trilogy, Yoda will tell Luke that hard to see the future is, right? Like it's like this, it's like you get the idea that when Yoda meditates, when they get into the Force, they can see these things, but they're not sure of it. Like there's a lot of different times in the Clone Wars or whatever, just different aspects where Yoda specifically will say he can see the future, but it's cloudy, or he can see it, but he's not sure. Right. And it's this idea that, which is a whole other huge concept of the void, out of where everything comes, that there really is nothing. Right. And that things just come out of existence. They just happen. in Buddhism, a lot of things were used to relate this, and the bell, not the bell, like a bell, right? Like there's empty space, and then all of a sudden, I forget what the little ball's called that hangs inside a bell, right? But when it clangs against the side, then it's created a vibrate, then it's created something, right? Like things come and go out of the void, right? So I think what they're getting at, maybe if it were to relate to any of this in that way, I think it would be the concept of the void, which is very interesting, but it gets very deep.
Some other time.
Yeah, right. Because you don't want to do that with me, but but I think to say it just in general, like it, because we're trying to, it is, but it is. I think what they're really meaning is that you get to this place where you see everything, right? Time doesn't exist. Time's a construct, right? It's something we've created, right? As far as how we look at it.
When you can move past the binary of time, you can see things from God's perspective, or the mask of God, as Joseph Campbell would say. Suddenly time doesn't matter. And so there is no difference in the universe. Think about if Anakin, when he's having all these dreams or he's meditating and all he sees is Padme's death, that's not all that was out there in whatever he was looking in, or right. He very easily could have, had he not focused and concentrated and tensed up, right, and tightened on this one thing that he had in his head, he would have seen Luke and Leia. He would have seen kids. He would have seen all this other stuff, right? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's like his tension, his anger, and he would have heard what Padme was asking of him, which was to leave, to give up the Jedi, to give up power. He would have heard that. And I think that then they would have been fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And it is this, Watts would compare it to the tension we all walk around with. I mean, all of us have been on Twitter and been scrolling, right, through the death doom that Twitter's become, recently, with not fandom stuff, just the world, right? And every now and then, and I love this, you'll see somebody and they'll just post, drop your shoulders, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like,
have you eaten today?
Right.
Have you had water?
Right.
And it's like, are you taking care of this person sitting in front of you? That is you.
Yeah. And until somebody tells you that, or until you are consciously aware of that, you don't realize how much we do walk around with our shoulders tensed up, is probably the biggest example you could give somebody. Right. And Watts would always talk about, he gave the example of, all of us have, most of us have flown before on an airplane. And what do 99, if not 100% of people do when you take off, or especially when you land? You grab, you tense up, right? Because this thing's happening, right? And you land, and he's like, you grabbing the sides of your seat in the airplane is not going to make it not crash. It's not going to make it stop any sooner, or right? But you still do it as a human. Like you tense up and you do that, right? And he talks about how the chronic muscular tension, that is what he calls it, that humans walk around in, right, throughout the day, is thinking they can control all of this, thinking they can control the world, right? That they can affect some great change in all of this, just causes more, right, issues with your body, with your mind, that this muscular tension that you bring in isn't that great for you. And that it's basically your mind playing tricks. It's like the illusion telling you, oh no, you can control this. No, you can't. Like, you're not going to stop the world from turning as much as you might want to, right? As much as you might want, in Anakin's case, to bring somebody back or whatever, right? The Force is, put it in Star Wars terms, these things are happening, right? And to be one with the Force is more so, I think, to realize that these things are happening, to be at peace with them, be calm with them, and let them happen, right? And then you get into the thing, though, of let me stay on this just one second. In Alan Watts' terms, then he goes. So he talks about this muscular tension, and then he goes into, you think you're this thing wrapped up inside a bag of skin, right? Your ego is the other thing that gets in the way. Okay. And he talks about the sensations that you feel that don't fit the facts, right, are just an illusion. That your muscular strain, your ego, you're thinking the way things are, you're projecting all these things. You want people to think you're powerful like Anakin does. You want people to understand you in this way and not that, right? That all of those things are causing most of your problems, right? And he has, I want to see if I can play this for you, this great line.
If you want to take a scientific point of view, by that mythology, then your organism, about which we know very little. And the organism, as we've seen, is inseparable from its environment. And so you are the organism environment. In other words, you are no less than the universe. Each one of you is the universe expressed in the place which you feel is here and now. You're an aperture through which the universe is looking at itself, exploring itself. And we're going to go into that much more deeply. So when you feel that you are a lonely, put upon, isolated, little stranger confronting all this, see, you have an illusory feeling, because the truth is the reverse. You are the whole works that there is, that always was and always has been, always will be. And indeed our very love, we've tried to force it with muscles. Men will understand me if I say, and you must trust it to have. And there is absolutely nothing you can do about it by using your muscles. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So in precisely the same way. Well, let's complete the picture. So therefore, the notion that we have of ourselves, of ego, is a compound of an image of ourselves which does not fit the facts, and a sensation of muscular straining which is futile, so that what you conceive to be yourself is the marriage of an illusion and a futility.
That's what I wanted to get to, because I love that line, that what you, like your ego, what you think you are is really the marriage of an illusion and a futility, right? Your thoughts of the future and past married with the futile aspect that there's nothing you can do about it, right? And so that's kind of the basis for like meditation, like why the water needs to become calm and clear, right? Why Qui-Gon will tell Obi-Wan, or I think, doesn't he even tell Anakin at one point he talks about the center at some point. And I can't remember if that's in the movie. He says you must center yourself, find yourself in the center. That's a big thing too.
Don't center on your anxieties, Obi-Wan. Keep your concentration here and now where it belongs. But Master Yoda says I should be mindful of the future, but not at the expense of the moment. Be mindful of the living force, young Padawan.
Beautiful. I mean, that's it in Star Wars in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
Mindful, give yourself the headspace, realize what's happening right now, and just be here.
Yeah. Because if you're centering on your anxieties are based on the past and on the future, right? You're thinking about either memories or illusion.
Right.
Right? That's not actually here and now.
Think about, sorry, go ahead.
What should people do if they've never meditated before or are trying to center themselves on the here and now rather than on the anxieties? Knowing that people might have a variety of different abilities to do that, chronic anxiety, etc.
Right.
What are some things that they can try to take on?
Like as far as meditation goes, you mean?
Being mindful of where they are.
Well, I think I think the first thing you could try is, like we said, like just sit and breathe, right? And exactly. And when to kind of close the loop that I probably didn't because I'd spin off a bunch of loops. When Luke takes Rey's hand and puts it on the rock, right? It's a very physical look. You're this. You're here. Just be here right now. Quit worrying about trying to get me back to Leia. Quit trying to worry about what's going to happen. You're here.
Yeah, don't worry about trying to become a Jedi.
right?
just exist.
Yes. And I think that we humans have to have that. I know for me, when I will sit and meditate, or when I am in the garage working, right? How you were saying you rock climb and different things. I think if I'm doing something other than sitting and doing, quote unquote, what's considered actual, textbook meditation. When you said, what can people do? Just whatever you're doing, if you enjoy it, whether it's cooking, right?
Or art.
Or rock climbing or art, whatever it is, take a breath and feel it. Feel the brush in your hand if you're painting, feel your feet on the floor, no matter where you're at, and realize most people, when they do this, will kick their shoes off. Realize you're a part of the earth, realize you're different than a tree, right?
In yoga, they talk about having your palms and your fingertips and your feet connect and become one with the earth, or what you're standing on your mat, having those two things be together.
Right. Because what are you doing really in that instance? You're just telling yourself, I'm here, I'm aware, right? Yeah. A lot of times you'll hear the term resting awareness, right? That you are resting in the sense that you're not having all these thoughts come and go, and that you're really aware of what you're doing, right? Even if you're sitting in a chair in meditation, a lot of times on the apps or different things, they will tell you, like I was saying, feel your feet on the floor, your butt in the chair, realize that gravity, that connectedness, right? And you automatically, your body just kind of goes, not limp, but just goes, oh yeah, I'm not tensed up trying to get out of this. I'm here, right? Same way if you're cooking, or you're saying you're rock climbing, just specifically tell yourself, oh yeah, feel that, right? Make a conscious effort not to concentrate on it too much, but just to go, I feel that rock, or I feel the knife in my hand as I cut the onion, or me in the garage with my son, I feel my feet on the floor, right? Mm-hmm. This comes in really handy too, I find, with my kids, especially in with loved ones, especially now when we're all locked up together. Things can get kind of crazy, right? And it does help to just take a breath and realize, I'm here with you right now. And I don't want to be thinking about what I have to do for work. I don't want to be thinking about this thing that happened this morning, with kids, with you, that you really got me mad about, right? When you wouldn't get ready or whatever it is. I'm just here with this beautiful thing right now.
Yeah.
And if I got all these things running through, if I've got all these things running through my head, then I'm really not here. I'm really not experiencing this fully. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really cool way to do it too. If you're just sitting around watching a movie together with a loved one, right? Or your dog, seriously, just pet them and realize, get that, make a conscious effort to go, oh, right. Because petting a dog is great meditation, right? Yeah. And just
or your cat, if you're cuddles with your cat,
whatever it is,
cuddles with your children, if you have children, the cuddles with your stuffed animal, it doesn't have to be, it's what you have. And if you're communicating with somebody virtually, are you communicating with them and giving them your attention and your presentness? And, you yourself need that too, because you're going to need that feedback loop.
Right. And it's I keep hammering that, but it is, if people will just, if you want to try it, you just realize you're here right now in this moment, and don't try too hard and strain on it. Right.
And that's
another example of this that I love is in Empire Strikes Back, when Yoda, at that point now, right, in the 80s when we saw this, we didn't know this, but now we know all of Yoda's failings through the Clone Wars and, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so by the time when he first meets Luke in Empire Strikes Back, in the whole scene where he lifts the X-Wing out of the water, even the great 900-year-old Jedi Master Yoda is straining and concentrating, right? When he closes his eyes and I get, again, this is back to, it's a lens to view this through, right? You can view it this way. When he's straining like that, okay, we know Yoda's now has just come out of all this stuff that happened in the prequels and in the Clone Wars and whatever else. And he's almost in a way doing exactly what he tells Luke, you must unlearn what you have learned, right? He's getting back into the Force, and he's trying to realize he had messed up 900 years, For 900 years, he failed. I mean, that's a big failure, right? And
he had allowed dogma to separate himself from the Force, from the meaning of the Force, and from being centered and understanding the living Force. He had allowed the Jedi Order to be more important than Did
you ever read the comic with him and Qui-Gon? It was like a one-off Qui-Gon comic. Yes. And it's great because him and Yoda are sitting there and they're having this argument about this. Not really an argument, but they're like, right? And Qui-Gon's like, no, watch, here's how you do it. And he just hops in his starfighter, right? And he just closes his eyes and takes off. He's like, this is how you do it. You just let the Force go, right? It just takes him to this other planet and he has this whole thing, right? But it's so Qui-Gon. He's like, Yoda's like, no, we've got to use the Force to do this, that, and the other. And he's like, no, you just hop in your car and do this, man. Like, obviously we're not suggesting people do that, but like, but my point with the Yoda thing in Empire Strikes Back, when he's training to lift the X-Wing, Ryan ties this up beautifully to show you, even in the Force, that, Yoda's gone by Return of the Jedi, right? He's become one with the Force. But even then, how much he's learned, because he has to strain and use his little arm and do all this to lift that X-Wing. But in The Last Jedi, all he has to do is lift a finger to bring down lightning.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he realizes now, like, you can see Yoda's growth almost.
Because there is no difference for Yoda.
Exactly. Yoda he's it.
The difference is only in your mind. The difference is only in your mind. And that's the thing that, like, you need to come across, is that how powerful our minds are in both ways, in how we view the world and how we interact with the world, and how we choose what we focus our attention on, because our attention is incredibly powerful, and being present is one of the most powerful things that you can do, because if you're spending all of your mindfulness and it's full of the past and the future, you're only giving yourself like maybe 10% towards right now.
Right. Like, think about Anakin, Vader, in the comics when he's meditating, dark side meditation. Usually they're meditating on something. They're focused, concentrating on, like, he's got all these images that are popping up of Padme's death, and he's just like, meditation for a dark side user is almost like, no, keep thinking about that thing, right? Like, we've been talking this whole time about how the past is illusion, the future is an expectation, like, just be here. Dark side users get in there, into the Force, get into their head, and it's just like, man, no, let's keep
the
antagonizing on that one thing, right? Like, let's just keep that up.
Like, it's like picking at a scab. Like, that's always
exactly right. Let's just keep going, because that feels good, doesn't it? Like,
well, and it reinforces like the pain prison that they're in, which is how they they generate their hate and their power and their selfishness. It just reinforces all of that,
right? And the daughter and the son do this really well too. Because if you just in general, like in Mortis, of course, but anytime they're seen, but in Mortis, yes, in the Mortis arc and Clone Wars, if you watch how they fight, the son is very, like, he's got to hit things. He's very aggressive. Like, and the daughter, literally, the light side, like, she takes, like, there's a scene, I think I did like a cartoon
judo move that she does, where she takes
Alan Watts talks about judo a lot. She takes it and just forces it back at him, right? She just takes it and, like, does this little spin dance thing and shoots it back at him, right? It's a very fluid, like, you're not forcing anything. You're not trying to control anything. You're just taking what comes at you and redirecting it, right? Like, you're very much like Bruce Lee, like, used to say, like, be like water, right? Like, you just flow with it is the best way to put it. But
I just want to challenge anyone who's listening to this, like, take today, and maybe for the rest of the week, take some time, set aside time if you need to. But even if you're just doing the activities that you're doing, you're working on your computer. Feel the keyboard beneath your fingers.
Right. Feel your butt in the chair. Feel your feet on the floor.
Exactly. And take a moment to center yourself when you're about to do those activities. And it'll help you, do what you need to do in the moment, And that's what's important.
Right, because it'll give you that headspace to deal with the much bigger issues that we're all facing right now in the world and that we're all going to face as time moves forward, right? Like you're just giving yourself that headspace. You're kind of cleaning out your room, right?
Or on your computer, you're deleting your trash folder.
That's a very good, or you're cleaning off your desktop, right? You're just making space for things. You're not saying they don't exist. You're just letting them come and go and giving yourself that calm, even if it's 5 minutes. And as a parent, I know that you have to sometimes maybe close the door and tell your kids you no longer exist if you want to do something like this, like a meditation app, and then they're banging on the door. But even like we were talking about, even if you can't do that, if you can't get away,
it doesn't have to be separate from your normal everyday activities. No. That's what we're trying to get to, is that it can be part of what you're doing. You're going for a walk, you're driving in your car, you feel the vibrations of the car, you feel the steering wheel under your hands, you see the road, and you're aware of what is around you in the mirrors. Like that is all that it is. It's being present in the moment that you're in and not focusing on the future and what might be beneath the cloud and the past and what has happened. It is the now.
Right. The present's called the present for a reason. It's a gift.
It's a gift.
Enjoy it. Right.
It's the only time we actually have. Right.
Exactly. Watts was big on this. He called it the eternal now.
The eternal now.
Right. That the eternal now, that if you can get this, if you can get to this, that's all it will be, is the eternal now, right? That you are just constantly in the moment, in the present. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh, for joining us for part 2. I'm sure we'll have more because there's lots of things to talk about with Alan.
Yeah. The Bindu's the big one. I'm
excited for that one. Yeah. So, Josh, where can people find you if they're looking for more of your thoughts and things online?
Ramblings. I am at Joshua V. Johnson on Twitter. That's where people can find me.
And usually when I get caught up on I don't know, my galaxy moments, then you start getting mad at me because you're like, I don't have time to go down the rabbit hole with you, Marie-Claire.
Right. I know. Yes. And this is the thing. Marie-Claire knows this and Ty knows this. If you message me or something and I don't get back to you, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be rude. I come and go like the waves. I will disappear for a while and come back probably. I try not to, but it happens.
You have things going on and you need to be present with other things. And that's an important practice. Taking breaks from Twitter is important.
Yes.
Taking breaks from the internet, being present with people that matter to you is incredibly important. I spent time with some socially distant family in a large backyard last night, and it was lovely. So
it's good, right?
Yeah,
it's good.
Take the moment when you have the opportunity and say yes to those things, and then be present in the moment when you can.
Beautiful.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is the What the Force theme, orchestral music provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who are obsessed and love What the Force: Brad, Cheryl Bell, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Susan, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Macau Mom, Neil, James, Joe Allen, and Christian Luca. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps others find the show. You can connect with us on Twitter at What the Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or at whattheforce.ca, where we have expanded our content to include reviews, metas, and articles. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.